65 to 70 million tons of waste annually, and only half of it gets recycled.
It's not just in our bloodstream. The breastfeeding mothers are feeding plastic through their breast milk.
Very capitalistic viewpoint is make more, sell more. But what do you do about the waste that's generated?
If you don't segregate, tell me what happens.
You mix it, you can't fix it.
From mountains to cities, India's waste problem is becoming bigger. The 62 million tons of waste we produce every year is posing a threat to our health and environment. Watch this episode till the end and learn how we all could clean up this huge problem of waste.
And waste is not waste, it's material. So when you look at it as a commodity, as a material, you suddenly see value for it, right? It's a very clear call for entrepreneurs to move into the space.
The least you could do is be responsible for it.
Hey, Arun and Marwan, welcome to the Better India show. This is a show where we speak with people who are addressing some of India's largest challenges. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about waste. How large is the waste crisis? How much waste does India produce? What is being done to address our waste? And how can a common citizen really kind of understand what is waste and what is happening to their cities? And how can they contribute in managing waste better, right? So welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for inviting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Great. So before I get into this whole landscape of waste and everything, right, it would be wonderful if you guys could get started by introducing yourself. Arun, you could start first talking about what you do and the organization that you're representing, which is Sahas Zero Waste.
Thank you so much. My name is Arun Murugesh. I'm thoroughbred Bangalore, to be honest, and been in the waste sector for around about 15 years now. So I work for this organization, a for-profit organization called Sahas Zero Waste, which is based out of Bangalore and operates pan-India as well. So we look at holistic waste management solutions, where we look at waste as resources and bring it back into the circular economy. So that's something about the organization. I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot of details about it and about the solutions as well. But me per se, I'm a mechanical engineer by qualification, product designer. Started off my my working journey as a product designer. My first job was in the waste management industry, so I used to design equipments for the waste management sector. This was back in the UK, and then I had my own startup for a couple of years. I was a B2B scrap dealer, if I can put it in simple terms. And beyond that, I decided to join this organization, Sahas Zero Waste, which today I've completed just more than 8 years in the organization. And I take care of all the sales operations. I specialize in a materials recovery facility, which is actually a factory setup for managing all the waste that comes out of anyone's bin, and also look at certain parts of plastics, so to speak. So that's my domain, and that's a bit of my background.
Great. No, thanks. Thanks for being on the show. Marwan?
Hi. So my name is Marwan Abu Bakr, and I'm one of the co-founders of Hasiru Dala Innovations. With inclusive circularity at the core of our ethos, we offer circular economy-centric business solutions that create a social and environment impact, simply put. So we integrate waste pickers into all our business models. Our prime objective is to make sure that anything that we offer as a solution has to be circular economy centric, and it must create an impact for the waste pickers that are in the waste space. We're based out of Bangalore, and we also offer services across the country. And a little bit about me, the entire reason I got into the waste space is because of my love for street dogs. I used to always promote adoption of street dogs, and one of the areas that I felt that required attention was, rather than buying bred dogs, you'd rather promote and adopt street dogs in the city. And during my time in all this promotion, there used to be a lot of dog bite cases in the city, and one of the areas of human-animal conflict was around waste. So where you would find waste on the streets, you would find a waste picker, you would find dogs and animals feeding, and that was one of the areas of conflict. And to solve that problem, that's how I got into waste.
Wow. Okay, that's an interesting perspective of coming into waste. I was doing a little bit of research on this whole waste management and how it kind of manifests, and um, from various reports, I kind of gathered that collectively, India generates almost about 65 to 70 million tons of waste annually, and only half of it gets recycled, and almost a little more than half of it goes into our landfills. And that is the state, let's say, today. And just going by the consumption patterns and how lifestyles have changed, apparently this is expected to hit almost about 170, 165 million tons of waste created by the end of just like 2030, which is 5 6 years from now. How do you guys see this challenge? How large is the crisis? Is it a crisis? How large is it? And are we even geared to kind of, you know, manage this, or are we just going to drown in garbage all around us?
Yeah. So okay. So to put things in perspective, the 65 million tons of waste annually that we are generating is about a lakh and 60, a lakh and 70 thousand tons of waste that gets generated per day. And if you look at waste as a problem, it's going to be a problem. But with organizations like us, Hasiru Innovations, with Sahas, and many others working in this space, we've created solutions where waste is not a problem, but if thought of responsibly and managed responsibly, you can convert that as a resource and send it back into the community and the economy for reuse, repurpose, or recycle. As a country, we've always practiced a collection and dumping process, but we've since 2000. Since 2000, from when in 1996 Almitra Patel filed the first PIL against the government for not handling waste responsibly, I think the government started looking at introducing laws since 2000, the solid waste management rules. And then with the recent upgrade in 2016, we have policies in place that talk about responsible waste management, decentralization of waste. It only comes down to implementation and following the process that's been prescribed, and also integrating organizations like us that can offer solutions for a city or the country as a whole. That's how I'd like to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of answering the question directly, is it a crisis? Of course, it's a crisis, and we all know about this. How do we know it's a crisis? I mean, Marwan mentioned very clearly about the animals on the street, the dogs and the cows, and there's so many information on social media saying so many kgs of plastic was extracted out of a cow's stomach, and there's reaching the dolphins and everything.
Just an average, it's 50 kgs of waste an average in a cow.
Yeah,
In a cow,
In a cow.
50 kgs.
50 kgs average,
Of
you'll find
plastic.
plastic in a cow.
And I'll tell you
Sorry
what.
to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's
Wow.
a great value that you added. In fact, I don't know how many kgs we've got in our bloodstreams because supposedly there are, tests that we can conduct for ourselves on how much of plastics is in within our stream. So we don't realize it now. I think it's already too late. But if we don't realize it now, it's doomsday for us. So it is definitely a crisis. And the other day, for almost a week, I live in south of Bangalore, and at a particular time around 7 o'clock in the evening, you have to close all your windows and doors because there's so much of smog. That's in Bangalore, and we know the other parts of the city. So it's definitely a big problem. Now, when we look at millions of tons of waste, it looks really unimaginable. We can't even imagine how big.
Yeah, I
this
mean, I
problem
can't
is.
even fathom when I read that term, 60 million tons of waste, right? Just because it's a number, you really don't know the enormity of the problem.
We can't understand until someone visits a landfill. Now in Delhi, everyone has to drive by the landfill so they can see it, right? So that's proof of the crisis. But then, I mean, the fortunate thing is organizations like us try and break it down, and that's where the solution is. And what do I mean by breaking it down? We call it decentralized. So when you look at a household, a colony, a ward, the problem becomes more realistic. Because if you were to solve a problem within your home, it becomes so much more simpler. What do? You just keep the waste separate, the dry waste and the wet waste and the sanitary waste. Keep them separate. Starts there. And if you were really wanting to understand how to solve the problem, you have to trace your own waste. And luckily in places like Bangalore, you have quite a lot of these solutions, and we can talk about it even more. But to me, yeah, it's a very big crisis. We can see it out there, but then there's something we can do about it.
So you think we are equipped to kind of address the crisis?
Absolutely, and it's our
given the-
responsibility more than
Right,
anything else. Yeah.
right. And like I was comparing the per capita waste generated in a developed country versus a developing country like ours, and that definitely is a large gap. I don't necessarily know if that is the gap that we should be bridging, but I guess it's inevitable as a trade-off with economic growth. There's just going to be more and more of this waste
Yeah.
generated. So, are there like learnings you guys have seen which the developed countries have implemented and are far more efficient, or do you think India needs its own playbook?
See, when you look at developing countries, they have a very different system in place. Some of them are known to export waste because they don't have enough waste. But then when you look at it, the core principles that we just spoke about is not really being adhered to, and that is resource recovery. So they seem to have solved the problem of waste and they seem to have found an outlet around it. But then the true assessment is in the life cycle assessment, end to end. Genuinely, what are you doing with your waste? Are you really making the full taking the full benefit out of the waste, which is nothing but resources? So, in my opinion, the Western countries have solved the problem per se, but I feel we have a better solution in our country, and it's very subjective. It's very geographical. Decentralized system that I spoke about. I mean, we all know that since we were born, you and I were born, we've known that all the newspapers that we've read have got recycled, right? But then that's a very small portion of it. So that's my problem with waste management in India. It's very fragmented. It's very contextual to what kind of material, because there's so many different types of material that are coming up. Now, in answer to your question, though we have some solutions and we have a fantastic informal sector who actually been the angels of the cities of India, but not all material is taken care of, so that piece needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I want to kind of go into this a little more in detail, but I just want to take a step back and for our audience to really understand what's happening to a wrapper of candy that they kind of just had, and that wrapper is thrown in the dustbin, and then you keep that dustbin outside for the dustbin person, the garbage collector person to come in and pick that up. It would be lovely if you could just help us understand what's the chain of actions that happen.
On an average, what we had seen before COVID was an average family of four would generate anywhere between 1 to 1.2 kgs of waste a day. But after COVID, things have gone out of balance because the entire structure of working changed from home to office to home, work from home. And that's kind of thrown everything out of balance, where now we're seeing anywhere from 1 kg to up to 5 kgs of waste generated per family of four. So what we need to understand from the question that you asked is we need to understand what is the waste that gets generated at home. You have your organic waste, which is your leftover food, your vegetables, veg, non-veg, whatever, organic basically, that can be composted. Then you have your paper, plastic, metal, glass that gets generated. From your home care liquid packaging to your any products food parcels that come in, to your sanitary waste that gets generated at home, from diapers, sanitary pads to anything contaminated by blood and body fluid. So these are the three basic categories that get generated on a daily basis, and it needs to be handled on a daily basis. So the key that we've been saying from the start is segregation. If the waste is segregated in these three categories at source from where it got generated, it's the simplest way of handling waste. If it does not get segregated, then the challenges arise. You cannot even fathom the idea. Just give an example of maybe say your street has about 50, 100 houses. And if you're segregating waste, you get it in a segregated manner, it goes straight into processing. If it does not get segregated, can you even imagine somebody retrieving anything from mixed waste? It's not possible. It becomes even more challenging and you lose a lot of the natural essence of all those materials. So a lot of materials don't get recycled, or it becomes challenging to recycle or reuse or repurpose that. So what really happens to waste, if it's not managed responsibly, it's collected from your home and it's dumped somewhere outside of the city. They call it the not in my backyard syndrome. Out of sight, out of mind. So people at home, they know waste gets generated. Once it leaves my premise, my gate, I'm not concerned. It doesn't bother me. And it rightfully doesn't, because it goes to somebody else's backyard. It goes out in the rural sector where people are living there, waste gets dumped. So those people out there are getting affected. Even today, this is a situation in the country today. With systems like us that we have, if you we ensure that segregation is implemented at the household level. We collect it in a segregated manner. It goes to the right processing unit. So organic waste can be converted to biogas and can replace LPG in restaurants. It can be converted to electricity as well. It can be composted. So there are solutions for organic waste if you invest in the right technology. All your paper, plastic, metal, glass largely has recycling capabilities. So there are existing recycling structures. All you need to do is plug it in. That's the kind of infrastructure that we have created for the city. And you're left with sanitary waste, with rightfully as per biomedical waste rules, has to go to an incineration facility because it's contaminated by blood and body fluids. It's hazardous waste. So that's the rightful disposal process for the waste that gets generated. If you look at it that way, there is no waste that needs to reach the landfill. You don't need a landfill. The problem arises when you don't segregate waste. That's when the need for more and more land space for dumping waste, because you can't handle it in a mixed manner.
But then the challenge becomes that I, as an individual, I start segregating.
Correct.
But if the rest of my street doesn't segregate, am I still incentivized to continue doing it because I step out and I see that all my segregated waste is anyway being clubbed together and so how do you address that challenge?
See, the principle is that you take responsibility for the waste you generate. And that goes hand in hand with the government and the municipal bylaws and the policies that are already in place. So you need to work with your local municipality and ensure that you hold each other accountable. The municipality holds you accountable for segregating waste, and the resident, the waste generator, holds the municipality responsible or the service provider responsible for handling the waste responsibly. So it has to be a joint effort. It can't be a one-sided thing. And once you have these two influences in place, then everybody will fall in line.
And I'm sure, that question lingers in the minds of so many citizens, right? So I segregated waste yesterday. I saw them, and even the people who are collecting it, they may even mix it together and say, I'll stop doing it. But like Marwan said, it's your responsibility. It's each one's responsibility to make sure that they continue to segregate their waste, because that's the law of the country. Now, when you don't follow the law, there's no way you can't justify it, right? So what can you do? You can actually, we discussed this earlier, you can compost the waste at home. It's extremely simple. And this is where waste management gets interesting. It's more DIY. When you bring in the tag of DIY, it gets very exciting, right? And there are enough solutions out there, and you can even make your own solution for composting. So that's 40% of the problem solved, because that's your organic waste component. The rest of them, Bangalore is, as a city, well known for its decentralized ward level collection centers. And anyone can actually make this as an activity to take their waste once a week, because it's not going to be too much with your inorganic waste. Take your waste once a week, go and drop it off at your dry waste collection center. Now, if you're able to do that, you've solved 90% of your problem. And like Marwan said, you don't need a landfill. You then have to obviously manage the sanitary waste, which is a bigger problem. We'll come to that later. But at least the larger chunk of the problem can be solved. So instead of actually saying, I'm not going to segregate my waste because someone else down the supply chain is not doing their job, let's do our bit first.
Right.
But then interestingly, this, like I said, this is where it gets interesting. What happens to the waste afterwards? This is another question that you asked earlier. So let's just, try and little bit deep dive. I'm not getting too technical, but let's deep dive. Let's say you have a bin full of waste. What does it have in it? It just looks colorful to you, right? But then when you hand it over to the next supply chain, the tier of the supply chain, which is a collection center, they would tentatively sort it into 10 to 15 categories of waste. Imagine one bin, 10 to 15 categories. Let's take one category out of it. And because plastics is so famous, I'll use plastics. Take the plastic component, which is one of the 15 categories. That then moves to another facility, which is a larger facility with more mechanization, where it probably gets sorted into 4 or 5 categories. But then there is another tier of the supply chain which can sort it into as many as 40 to 80 categories, depending on the market demand. Now, that's the complexity of waste. And let me take another typical example of textile. Textile is one of the biggest problems today. And if you see the landfills of tomorrow, it's going to be full of textile. So what happens to the textile waste from a bin? That then goes to a collection center and no further sorting happens. It gets aggregated there. It then moves to the next tier of the supply chain. We call it a textile recovery facility at our organization. And there, using technology, we can sort it into as many as 40 categories. I'm not going to go into the 40 categories, but
give me some examples of what
exactly,
categories. Like
exactly.
three,
So the
four of them.
viewers may want to know what are these categories, right? So let me group them into 5 categories. The first category is what we call swap. Now, we actually at our organization swap our clothes. Some of these clothes that come into our collection drive mechanism has the tags and labels on it.
Wow.
So this is a very common culture outside India. It's called the thrift stores, and it's picking up in India. So that's the first category where you're not at all doing anything to the waste. It's supposed to be waste, but then it becomes a fresh new piece of resource. Second category is the reuse category. Now, there are developing countries where the second-hand market is still quite a big market. So you could take out those bits which are not swappable because of the dynamics around it, and then it could move into the second-hand market. So that's quite a big piece. Not many people know this, but it can happen within India and outside India as well. The next categories are your recyclable categories. So within recycling, you have 2 categories per se. So what you do is you sort it into different categories, and we have something called NIR spectroscopy, which identifies the blend of fabric. Based on the recycler's demand, you would then remove the accessories like the buttons and the zippers and then pass it on to recycling. That's the third and the fourth category. Unfortunately, a lot of the textile waste that comes in are contaminated. It cannot really be recycled. It's so contaminated that it can't be recycled, and it then goes towards energy recovery, which is not the ideal way, but it solves the problem as of now until it gets better. So that's deep diving into waste, and this is when it starts to get really interesting.
Got it. So, so when we talk about the whole life cycle of waste management, I hear both of you talking about this whole segregation bit. How effective has it been in a city like Bangalore, and how effective has it been in other parts of the country? If you guys have any comparisons.
I think pre-COVID, I think we can agree we were at a very good level where we were almost at 40-50% of the city that's segregating waste responsibly, and the collection systems were in place where the municipality would ensure collection of organic waste separately. The dry waste collection centers that Arun mentioned, which are neighborhood recycling centers, would collect the dry waste separately, and waste was handled in a better way in terms of collection at least. But post-COVID, I think everything went haywire because I think the focus for everyone is on health. But they didn't realize, what they don't realize is that waste is also connected to your health. If you don't handle waste responsibly, it is coming back and going to affect your health. So I think we're struggling now, but with the way things are going, I'm being hopeful that things will pick up and go in a more positive direction. Facing other cities, I think segregation is a big challenge. I think I can confidently say Bangalore is one of the leading cities in terms of citizen awareness, in terms of implementing segregation and following systems. But we are not able to demonstrate it as an entire city. These are all activities and achievements that are happening in select parts of the city, but not as the city as a whole. But in other cities across the country, it's a huge challenge, I would say. And I'm sure Arun would agree to that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen the same. And I can sort of link up with the Swachh Sarvekshan rankings as well. Let's sort of look at the top ranked cities. Segregation at source can be good in those cities, but it does not reach very high levels. And even if it reaches high levels, I think we need to talk about another problem here, which is a systemic problem around the resource recovery, because if you don't have resource recovery, you don't have a business case in waste management.
Sorry, what is resource recovery?
So let's say the top city in India segregates most of its waste, right? A high percentage of its waste. If you actually look at what happens to the waste, most of it goes towards energy recovery into a cement factory. And this is as high as 90% can go to a cement factory,
Wow.
and 10% gets recovered as recycling.
So when it goes to the cement factory, it's basically you're
Burning.
burning it and generating heat and
What you could use another terminology saying that it's used as an alternate fuel. Okay. These are larger companies and they have more responsible solutions. So I'm guessing, I've not really assessed this, but I'm guessing that they have their emissions and things
Sure.
in place. So when they use this as an alternative to coal, it's an alternative to fossil fuel, you're using waste with a high calorific value, like a plastic has very high calorific value. You're using that energy to create heat energy, which is then used in production of cement, and the remains is actually used as raw material in cement. So it's a reasonable solution, but it's not the best solution. A country like India, where a lot of the paper and the metal historically has been recycled, if you're not recovering those and sending them away to energy recovery, it's not the right solution. So segregation at source is important, but you also need to link it to a very systemic and a systems problem of the supply chain infrastructure with resource recovery. But yeah, coming back to this problem statement, it's not too high. To put a number to it, it's not even 20, 30, 40% in our opinion. And there are pockets of excellence, of course, within the country, but they're very small in scale.
got it. And so that brings me to this whole other point, right? Like I do my segregation of waste, but eventually we keep talking about this whole informal sector and stuff. So I want you guys to throw some light. Maybe you could start, Marwan. Who manages our waste in a city?
So when you speak about the urban local bodies, the metro cities, it's the responsibility of the ULB, the municipal government, be it any city, or it translates back. If you go outside the city, then it translates back to your panchayats, and they are the ones directly responsible as government bodies to ensure that the facility of collection and transportation of waste is handled by them. So, for a city like Bangalore, it is directly the municipality that is responsible for it. In 2014, 15, if I'm not mistaken, is when Bangalore decided that it would introduce bulk waste generator system, where anybody, back then it was 50 kgs a day. Today it's 100 kgs a day who generates is considered a bulk waste generator, like an apartment complex, a gated community, or any malls. Basically, those kind of communities need to be serviced by private agencies. Private agencies that bring in their own infrastructure and do not depend on the government's infrastructure. So the non-bulk generators is the responsibility of the municipality, and the bulk waste generators the responsible of what we then called was empaneled vendors or responsible waste processing units.
These are vendors which have been appointed
By the municipality.
by the
You need to be
municipality.
vetted by the municipality with all your destinations verified,
Right.
and then you are given the license basically to offer services to bulk waste generators.
Right.
So that's how it functions here in Bangalore.
Right. And sorry. go ahead.
Similarly, these have been replicated in other cities where bulk waste generator systems have been introduced, but it's not as strong as how it is in Bangalore.
Got it. And the question from there for me was that we also keep talking about this whole informal sector
Yes.
playing a big role.
Mm.
What is the role they play, and why is that sector still there? Like I would imagine that the informal sector shouldn't exist. They should probably move on up the value chain and get to kind of because many times we praise that sector saying, hey, that's the one which is managing your waste, but then isn't that actually detrimental to the way we are as a society, whereas you want them to actually move up the value chain and do other things?
The entire, apart from the metropolitan cities, the rest of the country is dependent on the informal sector for waste collection. And they are our environment wardens, if you ask me. We call them green collar staff. They are the people silently in the darkness of the night go about collecting all the waste that's lying on the streets and the landfills, retrieving that and sending it for recycling. They are encouraging the recycling industry. But they're doing this to survive. They're not doing this as a profession. You don't need a PhD to become a waste picker. It's a open or a free entry barrier. Anybody can get into waste picking, and unfortunately, it's communities who have either been in the waste picking family for years, or somebody who has been affected by natural calamities that have had to get into waste picking because it's such an easy entry barrier for them to earn some money. Because the waste that we discard today, that we don't realize, has some value, and the people that collect the waste retrieve that and survive on that. So an average waste picker, if you ask me, earns anywhere between 150 to 300 rupees a day by collecting waste either by foot or by cycle, going from anywhere from 1 kilometer to 50 kilometers, retrieving that waste. If walking, imagine a person is carrying almost close to about 50 kgs on their shoulder, walking around, trying to find your neighborhood kabadiwala or a recycler who's there, a scrap shop. So he would collect all the waste that has value. And what you see on the waste otherwise, what you see on the streets otherwise, is the waste that does not have any value, which is basically so many other components, from plastics to multi-layer plastics. You
Right.
know, so I would say they are the key resource that we have, and what Bangalore again has been the leading city that has demonstrated, which has come into policy today in the solid waste management rules and the plastic waste management rules, that waste pickers need to be integrated into the waste management system. And at Hasiru Dala Innovations, that's what we do. We
Yeah.
integrate all our services offerings with the
In
waste
fact,
pickers.
Marwan, I wanted to kind of double down on that a bit. And if you could help us understand how you're integrating waste pickers in the entire workflow of what you're doing at the organization level. If you could kind of start right from the source where you have a source from where you have to collect
Yeah.
waste, and then just help us understand the entire chain.
Sure. So basically, there's three services that we offer offer today. One is called Circular Communities, which is basically a total waste management end-to-end solution when it comes to waste solutions for a bulk waste generator. So from collection, that is either door to door or centralized collection from any of the bulk generators, it is collected and transported to our secondary transfer station. So we're the only ones that are transferring from a primary to secondary vehicle that is ultimately taking it to the processing units in a private piece of land. And the organic waste goes into the biogas facility, and all the paper, plastic, metal, glass waste that has any recycling value, that is transferred directly back to the waste pickers. So that's an added incentive apart from the operation costs that they receive for doing the entire collection. So we call it the waste picker franchise model, which is basically a waste picker who shows a little bit of leadership quality, comes forward with a team of 5 to 8 people, who offers the primary collection from either door to door or centralized collection. And the entire route of the collection, the entire bulk waste generator, everything is designed, tech enabled, GPS enabled, and all they need to do is follow the process. Transfer it to a secondary vehicle, and the secondary vehicle takes it to their respective destinations.
And you primarily work with the bulk waste generators.
Bulk waste generators.
And so, just for my clarity, you've got a group of waste pickers who you equip with knowledge about
Yeah.
what the route is, and you give them all the
So, like I said, we call it a waste picker franchise. So
Right.
we have about 22 waste picker entrepreneurs right now who are offering services to a little over 32,000 households today. So these waste pickers, how they're the ones who I could say are getting predictable income. That's what we are trying to achieve through this service. Because otherwise, what I had said earlier about waste picking, there's no predictability in how
Right.
much, it's the amount of effort that they need to put to retrieve whatever value that they can get. Here in our service, a waste picker in uniform goes to your house. You segregate your waste, and with dignity, the waste picker is able to offer professional services. So today, that's what we are offering in our circular communities. So this service has dedicated teams and there's predictability in their income. Through this, we are able to see, um, 122% increase in their average monthly income.
So how many waste pickers now are part of the circular community thing, and how much do they earn on an average a month?
So we have 22 waste picker entrepreneurs. So there are more than a little over 300 that are directly impacted through this circular community service, and an average from a worker 15 to 18,000 is what a person individually earns.
Okay.
So the waste picker entrepreneur would earn a little more because he's the one taking the responsibility of the team.
Right.
And takes the onus of the entire responsibility. So what we've kind of developed is a more entrepreneurial relationship rather than an employer-employee relationship, because a waste picker is very entrepreneurial in nature. Because if you looked at their earlier way of earning, they would wake up whenever they would feel like, walk or cycle as far as they felt like, and retrieve whatever and make that money. We just enhanced that opportunity. We built a relationship and called it an entrepreneurial model where you also do the same thing, but we give you a better setup. So the vehicle that is used for collection, either they bring that vehicle or we finance that vehicle. So that becomes a value-added asset for them. So then I don't have to worry about the maintenance of the vehicle because they know that's an asset for them. So they take care of the responsibility. So what we're trying to do is just build on their entrepreneurship and continue that position.
Right.
The second service that we offer is called circular events. So any event, be it a wedding, music festival, sporting event, religious, political, personal events, all of these events generate waste. Anywhere from 5 people attending an event to over a lakh, we've been able to handle those kind of events and ensure our waste pickers offer housekeeping and waste management services. So the events service is more of a supplemental income for waste pickers, because an event is not a year.
Yeah.
One event does not last an entire year.
Right.
It's anywhere from a few hours to a few days. So the beauty of this service is that a waste picker gets to attend an event that they would never otherwise even dream of being a part of. We've had instances where our waste pickers who are part of a wedding, where guests who would come would try and would divert attention from the bride and groom and figure out what the waste pickers are doing. Why are they segregating the banana leaf separate and the paper separate or the cloth separate? Why? What are they trying to do?
And they are in uniform,
And they're in
it's such a
uniform,
different.
and I've heard this so many times, and
Yeah.
I'm so proud to say that all of our clients who've availed our services have always said all of our waste pickers are always smiling.
Yeah.
Because one, I would say that they're getting an opportunity to work, firstly, that they make some better income, and also that they get an opportunity to be a part of these celebrations.
Right.
You
In fact, one of the ones I actually noticed you guys being there is one of the marathons that was there in Bangalore a few
Yes.
years ago.
Yeah.
And I noticed, you guys were helping out with segregating all of that waste coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective to add, that they also get to attend these events.
Yeah.
And so that's your circular events.
The circular events. And the third one, sorry, is circular plastics, which basically means that we want to work with multinational brands to integrate recycled post-consumer plastic in either their packaging or textile, make it a little more equitable for them to align themselves with SDG goals and try and take responsibility for the waste that's sent out into the market. So we work with the likes of H&M, where all their buttons in men, women, and children created here in India, the buttons are made from recycled plastic, from where 30% of that recycled plastic comes from us. We work with Cofresco, where they create garbage liners and cling films from post-consumer plastic waste that is exported out of the country today. So there are
Wonderful.
a couple of other brands that I can't reveal yet.
Right, sure.
It's not officially launched, but it's still coming up.
Great. So this is interesting, Marwan. So if I am hosting an event and let's say I have 1,000+ people coming in, how do I get in touch with Hasiru Dala Innovations and avail
So
this?
we have a 7 days, 9 to 5 manned helpline number 972112362 that you can reach out to and place a request, and somebody from the team from the events division will reach out to you.
Okay, wonderful, great.
Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing that detail of how you work. Arun, I want to really get into a little more detail about SARS Zero Waste and how exactly do you play a role in the whole waste management scheme of things. So, again, like I said, I want to go a little deeper, understand the entire chain, right from source till the final impact.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I just want to add, like Hasrudala Innovations, we kind of complement each other in some sort of a way. So the first service that Marwan spoke about, we call it a zero waste program. It's called the ZWP program. So we cater to a lot of the bulk waste generators who are from the corporate segment. So let's say a lot of tech parks in places like Bangalore, some of them in Hyderabad, Chennai, NCR, etc. We're expanding to those regions. So these larger tech parks, which will house thousands of employees, would typically have something called as an on-site waste management, a very holistic way as well. So let's say you have one particular tower in a tech park in Belendur in Bangalore. Each of those towers will have a facility at the basement or in the ground floor, and the waste from all of the towers would come down through the housekeeping staff to this facility. And of course, we work a lot with the housekeeping staff and the employees to make sure segregation at waste is possible. So that's one level of engagement we have with the teams. And then once the waste comes to these facilities as segregated waste, as wet waste and dry waste, the wet waste has multiple solutions like composting, on-site biogas, off-site biogas, etc. So it gets converted to biogas and used as energy. The dry waste would be aggregated. We would, to some extent, inspect it to make sure that it does not have any contamination. And if there are contamination, that moves to the landfill right from there. If not, it moves to what we call as a materials recovery facility. So we have one in Bangalore, we have one in Goa, and in Delhi as well, in Gurgaon. So the one in Bangalore is now 6 years old. It's our mothership, so to speak. And we then sort the waste into multiple categories. This then goes to other recovery centers beyond the MRF, the materials recovery facility. It goes to, facilities what we call as textile recovery facility or plastic recovery facility. So we have different kinds of solutions there. Sometimes the kind of laptops and servers that we bring, we've set up something new and we're just waiting for the authorizations to kick in, but we'll be refurbishing them, the computers and the laptops. So that then comes back into a regenerative economy for reuse. So we're working with maximum resource recovery. And what's the benefit of doing this for the corporate? They get to successfully certify themselves. So there are global certifications around True Zero and various others. So we work with these kind of certifications to draw upon a lot of data. So we have a lot of MIS systems. We have a lot of other technology that we use internally for traceability, etc. But the scoring for these certifications is not just on responsible waste management, it's how do you get to the next level. So in a hierarchy of waste management, reuse and reduce comes really high up. So this is a very big focus for us. So this is one of the key flagship programs for us, and we've been operating this for many years, for more than 10 years now. And it's picking up quite well. And now that it's mandated by the government, by SEBI, for something called as BRSR reporting, this becomes a very crucial aspect for aspects like ESG, etc. So this entire system that has been set up has been able to provide the right kind of data and the right kind of proof of responsible waste management for the corporates of the large corporates of the world. So this is something that we operate quite extensively with. There are two other divisions that we operate with. So we have what's called as the extended producer's responsibility. This is a very well put out law in India, which has been there for maybe around 5 to 6 years or slightly more, and has started picking up pace really now, especially from the context of plastics and e-waste, but also is moving into aspects of textile waste, etc. We have this for batteries and tires as well. Now, what is EPR? It's a well-known name, but then if you can simply put it out, it means extended producer responsibility. Now, producer has an extended responsibility that the packaging waste and the product itself needs to come back into a circular economy. So a very capitalistic viewpoint is make more, sell more, etc. Right? But what do you do about the waste that's generated? So the government, and this is happening globally, but very well implemented in India recently, is the concept of EPR. And we facilitate brands and corporates to be able to recover their waste, not just the plastic, but e-waste as well. Now, unfortunately, it's taken a bit of a different turn in the recent past. While there are some advantages of data available through the Central Pollution Control Board about how much of plastic are the brands putting out, the top brands putting out, how many lakhs of tons of, the non-recyclable MLP are they putting out, and e-waste are they putting out. So that's available. But unfortunately, it's not really taken shape yet. It's moving in the right direction, so to speak. But right now, it's in a very, very difficult situation where certain, parts of the supply chain have been taken out. Recyclers have been given a lot of importance, and there have been a lot of scams that have recently surfaced, especially in Karnataka. So yeah, that's another aspect that we work with. But even within here, I'd like to sort of say how we, again, complement Hasiru Dala innovations from a supply chain perspective. We actually look at the supply chain as a very long supply chain, and we've distributed it across 9 tiers, right from the government to the consumer, to be honest, and the private sector involved as well. So we actually look at downstream of the supply chain, the brands, the recyclers, the aggregators. And in that space, we have a very interesting model called as a social inclusion model. Now, what does this do? We spoke about the informal sector, right? You asked this question. Now, the informal sector is a lot of the waste picker community, waste worker communities as well, but it also includes the scrap dealers and aggregator communities as well. Not just that, it also includes startups, entrepreneurs wanting to move into this space. They look at the supply chain and say, where is the opportunity? And this is definitely one of the opportunities. See, the most difficult part is the collection transportation that Marwan explained about, that we work with to some extent with the government as well. But this piece is another very important piece. So what we do is we have a very thorough program and a framework. It's an open source framework. We actually put it out quite a lot. And what we try to do is facilitate providing a right platform for the informal sector, the aggregators, etc., who can bring in the waste pickers as well. And we are actually in discussions to actually try and see how to collaborate on that. How do you help them? Because when it comes to the larger scale of the game in waste management, it's very capital intensive, and you can't even imagine sometimes. So when you look at the informal sector coming in who don't have access to capital, who don't have access to financing, etc., we try and help them, not by financing them, but by working with them through a very inclusive model of, here is all of the information on a platter and you just have to take it and run with it. That kind of a model. So we work with the informal sector as well in this segment. And if I can put it very simply, EPR is reverse logistics. Yeah. So when you look at a consumer product, it's forward logistics. What happens to the waste from a consumer product is reverse logistics.
How do you get it back into
How do you get it back into the circular economy and not let it go to the landfill? So that is the bare minimal legal requirement for brands as a reverse logistics. We add layers to this. How do you make it a more responsible supply chain? How do you make it a responsible reverse supply chain? We heard about things like minimum wages and what waste pickers should be earning, etc. So we try and provide that kind of compliance of no child labor, provide the right level of infrastructure, safe working conditions with machinery, equipment, better efficiency, business models, better revenue streams. So it's a very comprehensive model which we are now scaling up, and we bring that into the picture of EPR. So that's the second function. And the third function is a very important function for us, which is what we call as closing the loop. So we actually partner with a lot of recyclers to bring back waste into life. So you can talk about plastic, non-recyclable plastic, which gets made into boards, and that comes back as products. We actually have a lot of projects where we make tables for school children, and that goes to various government schools, many states in Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, etc. So that's a very interesting program that's happening in the background, but that's just one of the solutions. We bring back products as books, pens, papers for school children, etc. We also work with self-help groups to be able to bring back textile waste as products, and that's called that's through a concept of upcycling. So this is the third function, and we have multiple such solutions. We have this on our website as well, variety of products, but then every product has a story around it. It has an impact story around it. And that's actually making sure that, this entire loop is closed. That's the closing the loop component as well. So these are the three main functions that we operate with. flagship program with a lot of corporates. We're also moving into the residential sector as well, where compliance is not so per se, it's not very highly regarded, but it's picking up slowly. So these are some of the functions that we have and the solutions we provide.
In terms of the total waste that's generated, how much is from residential, how much is from industries, and how much is from any other sector? What's the split?
So we know that bulk waste generators is typically like a 40%, I would say, of the city's
Of the
generation.
city, yeah.
40,
And bulk waste is anybody who's generating more than 100 kgs.
100 kgs.
What are these entities typically? They are what, hotels, restaurants?
They are like the industries and also the residential complexes, institutions, larger institutions like colleges, etc.
Right.
The tech parks, office spaces, all of these put together. I don't know if I have a number. Do you, Marwan? I don't have a number around the distribution between the residential and the industries.
No,
but-
I wouldn't have the number, but yeah, like you rightly said, 40% of the city waste is generated by the bulk waste generators, and 60% is the non-bulk waste generators, which also includes government bodies, government
Right,
offices, and all
right.
that.
So if I put a ballpark number, 60% is mostly residential. That's very clear. And then of the 40%, some part is residential. It can vary with cities, depending on it being an industrial town or whatever, So it can vary, but you can say minimum 60% is residential for sure, with small commercial element into it, shops, establishments, etc.
Right. And I kind of want to just go back to the whole waste picker part and the informal sector part, because I think that's where a large chunk of the impact is being generated with the work.
That's why we exist.
That's why that's why the amazing work that you're doing. I would love to hear some transformative story of success, if there's any. I'm sure there are many, but anything that's close to you that you are really fond of.
It just is so emotional to see. Over the years, I've spent almost close to 15 years in this space, and while I entered this space trying to bring in a change for street dogs, I didn't realize I'll start impacting people as well. And waste pickers are somebody who are directly impacted through the work that we are trying to offer in the country today. Now, when before Hasiru Dala Innovations, it was Hasiru Dala, the not-for-profit, that existed, and the sole purpose of the not-for-profit was to bring in recognition for waste pickers in Bangalore, and that's when the whole movement around the country started about waste picker integration. In 2012 was a landmark year when the municipality of Bangalore was the first municipality to issue work-based ID cards to waste pickers. And then eventually from then on, every municipality was directed to integrate and identify and issue work-based ID cards. Because until then, until 2012, waste pickers didn't have an identity. They were the first people that would be harassed if there was a theft or robbery in the neighborhood. They would be the first ones rounded up by the police. The most devastation that happens due to climate change, they're the first ones to get impacted. And what happened in 2012 was, before the municipality that issued these work-based ID cards, they wouldn't just wake up one day and issue work-based ID cards. We did a lot of groundwork, and one of that was a public paper that we published where we did a study of about 15,000 waste pickers. We estimated back then was about 30 to 40,000 waste pickers in the city. We did a study of about 15,000 waste pickers, and we analyzed that they are diverting about 1,050 tons of waste per day, which is saving the municipality 84 crores annually. So this was the foundation in which the municipality issued work-based ID cards to waste pickers. From then on has been a transformative change in waste picker and the communities who are working around waste. Now, that was the first transformation. That was the first change and impact that the not-for-profit had created. But the waste pickers, as humble and as marginalized as they are, they came back saying, okay, now we are not getting harassed as much. People know us. People respect us now. So they understand what we're doing for the country, which we didn't realize that we were doing. But we're still doing the same thing. We're still going to unhygienic places and collecting waste, either landfills or the street corners. What can be done about that? And that's when, in the not-for-profit, we piloted these services that I spoke about earlier, which was an end-to-end services to bulk waste generators and events. From then on, we realized that the word of mouth spread and the services started to grow. So in 2015 is when Dala Innovation started. And we are the only multi-stream waste management company that's World Fair Trade certified. So which basically means that, we are following the World Fair Trade principles, so ensuring there is fair wages to, all the people involved in our supply chain, including the waste pickers, and many other principles that the World Fair Trade Organization prescribe. Now, to give you an example of a nice story of one of our waste pickers, I would speak about Lotfar Ali, who was the first waste picker entrepreneur who believed in our entire gambit of entrepreneurial journey of all these services that we wanted to bring about. And I always make this joke around when we started offering services to bulk waste generator and the not-for-profit first. When we piloted it then, we were a not-for-profit, so it's not like a not-for-profit would have a lot of money to invest in offering services and stuff. So we had to gamble around and figure out what kind of a solution that we can offer. And I always jokingly say that when Lotfar Ali came, he started our services, the total waste management services back then, and he brought a three-wheeler vehicle which ran on two wheels because it always had a problem. The vehicle always had a problem, and that was a genuine problem that the waste picker community always will have. And that's when he started financing vehicles eventually to support this thing. So he was a free roaming waste picker who believed in our in our vision of waste picker integration and being able to offer professional services. So he started this journey of offering services to bulk waste generators, and today he owns 4 trucks that's offering services to over 2,000 households.
Wow.
Today. The next level of his transformative journey from a free roaming waste picker to an entrepreneur who is offering professional services to now he's running a material recovery facility. So that's his growth story. So from collection to ensuring that all the dry waste, paper, plastic, metal, glass that gets generated, it's further segregated anywhere from 5 to 35 categories and then sent to recyclers. So that's been his growth story, that we are demonstrating what is true integration of a waste picker into the evolving circular economy value chain.
That's amazing. Really, like what a transformation to
Yeah.
kind of bring in.
Thank you.
I like to add a similar story as well.
Yes.
So, as part of our zero waste program, we have around 200 base of the pyramid staff who've actually they've been with us for more than a decade now, some of them. And very interestingly, during the pandemic period, because, Marwa mentioned this earlier as well in terms of dependable income. And the depth of the impact that a dependable income can create is mind-blowing. Generations of impact. And we've measured this as well through some baseline studies and midline surveys as well. But what is very surprising is during the pandemic period, because we have our contracts in place with the corporates, we did not actually get disturbed with our business model. Yes, part of it was disturbed because part of it was through sale of waste. And there's no waste, right? There's no work happening during the lockdown.
Yeah.
But all our staff were getting their salaries because we were getting the service fees from the clients. And the engine was running. It continued to run. But pre-pandemic period, I would just like to quote one instance. So we spoke about the collection centers in Bangalore. There was one collection center which unfortunately had to be demolished because of some infrastructure development of flyovers and the Bangalore metro and everything. So there was this person called Thiru who was actually working alongside of this collection center. He used to put a tarpaulin around it, and he used to be collecting Tetra Pak from liquor outlets in Bangalore. This is when we used to run our Tetra Pak program, and we started getting engaged with him to buy the Tetra Pak that he sorts. He collects, he sorts. So we used to give value to the Tetra Pak, and there was a beautiful program around it that was more like voluntary EPR those days. Now, it took a while to actually build the trust with this person. He did not have his own truck at that time as well. And at that time, the flyover came crashing down. The collection center had to be shifted, and he lost that space. So he came to us and he said, can you help us out? So we sat down and we spoke to him, and there was a kind of a deal that we struck where we would help him finance a vehicle, provided he signs off a contract with us for a collection service for our zero waste program. And that was the start where he actually got his first four-wheel vehicle, which is the smallest of the vehicles, which can carry around 1 ton of material. And he started understanding that actually getting into contractual terms can be a very good solution. And I'm happy to share that this guy, Thiru, today owns 12 large trucks. And he's one of our biggest partners for logistics across Bangalore. And he's been able to bring more people and add to these teams. And we're constantly, asking him to get to the next level of, get your company registered and, look at all the formalities for all your team members, the bare minimals in terms of minimum wages, ESIPF. So we are actually bringing the trickle down effect. This is the solution that business models can bring in. Someone who was from a waste picker community who used to go and collect waste on the streets, like Marwan said, during the nights when the liquor outlets are shut, up till the day he comes back and then he sorts the waste himself and along with another waste picker in the day. He is today an entrepreneur and runs an enterprise. So that's a very fulfilling experience. And we have many such experiences across as well. So
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I personally, I'm really blown away with the fact that this is not just increasing income levels. You guys are enabling them to become entrepreneurs, and in general, sort of, when you look at the entrepreneurial landscape, you're never thinking that a rag picker or a waste picker can also have the potential to become an entrepreneur at the scale that you're talking about, right? 12
sometimes they're
trucks
the
and 4 trucks, and
Sometimes,
that's incredible.
He's in fact filing GST as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow, right?
that's the level of growth that he's had. And many others, not just him, but
Yeah.
there are also many others.
And to me, that is a testament to the incredible work that organizations like yours are doing, and which, if someone's watching this, looks at Hasiru Dala Innovations, looks at Sahas Zero Waste, and say, look, is there an opportunity for me also to come in and help out in this whole waste management scheme of things? At the same time causing impact. Of course, you're causing impact because you're managing waste, but then causing impact on livelihoods. What would you say? Are there opportunities? Where are the opportunities? Where can someone being interested in waste come in?
It's a very simple answer. There's a lot of waste.
Absolutely.
No two organization. I think the only way forward is whoever wants to get into this space is most welcome because there's that much waste to handle. No one organization can handle all of it. And the only way forward is to collaborate. Because there's basic waste management, which is collection of the waste generated, and there's further up the value chain where you need to process it in the right way. If you're looking at EPR, if you're looking at recycle, circular economy, you need to offer those kind of levels of segregation, those kind of quality of waste for brands, because everyone in this entire supply chain in the waste hierarchy have to fall in line and understand the need. If you want to make it a successful, viable business, there are certain processes that you need to follow. If you're trying to work with multinational brands, there are certain expectations from you as an organization. So those deliverables have to be met.
Sure.
So there is no entry barrier in this space. Of course, there can be challenges in terms of understanding your city's dynamics. Or your wherever you come from, wherever you want to start, waste management journey. So my only request to people viewing this is, if you're getting into the waste management space, think of the people already existing in the space and learn to integrate. Do not displace them.
Right.
Because integrating is the key. So you don't have to reinvent anything. Facilitate the people that are there who don't have the opportunities that you have. I think that's the biggest learning that we've had, that by facilitating, creating opportunities for the people in this space, we've had beautiful relationships and worked so much more faster, so much more stronger. And the offerings are that much larger. And the impact's 10 times more that.
Right.
I think that's what I would like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree to that as well. And it's a very clear call for entrepreneurs to move into the space, whichever segment of the supply chain. You're an entrepreneur, you want to get into the upstream, downstream, no problem. There's enough opportunities. And what we can also work with is, like Marwan mentioned, collaborations, right? So I can give you instances. There was someone from the corporate sector walked into our office And he said, I'm fed up of my corporate job. And he says, I want to go back to my hometown, which is in Tamil Nadu. What do I do? Just tell me, what do I do? Today, he's one of our best partners in Coimbatore. His name is Sundar. And he's living his life because he's looking at community waste problems. He gets to go back home, doesn't have to work, from the corporate segment anymore. We have many people who've just finished their very, very extensive MBA degrees. They say, I'm from Madhya Pradesh and I want to do something for my hometown, my village. What do I do? I saw this video of an entrepreneur that you put out, and he's solving the the problem of plastic in a small town in remote Madhya Pradesh. I'm very close to that city or the town. How do I get into this? So, what we do is through our social inclusion model, we put it out there. We just put out everything as a kind of a franchisee model or a partnership model, whichever way you can call it. But the beauty about this is, like Marwan mentioned, it can be a very inclusive model, and we want more people in the space. So the business side of it, the compliance side of it, how do you fast track it, how do you de-risk it, all of that is available. And we're very happy to look at people looking at partnerships. The people who come to us and said, I saw this fantastic recycling machine from Germany, I want to buy that. I asked him, do you know how much it costs? He said, probably 3 crores. I said, do you understand the complexities? We spoke it out, and this guy called Sharan, who's based out of Bangalore, he said, oh my God, plastics is very complex. Let me start with the basics. Today, he runs an aggregation facility, and he still has a vision to have the best recycling in India. We're partnering with them. So, very clear call for entrepreneurs and startups wanting to move. Not to forget about the tech part as well. I'm very excited about it because a lot of entrepreneurs come to us and say, hey, I've got this machine learning artificial intelligence solution that I want to perfect. I've got this DIY solution at home. Can I scale it up? We have so many people coming into this space. So yeah, absolutely. Viewers out there, if you want to get in touch with us, we both have solutions at different parts of the supply chain. We're very happy to collaborate with everyone.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think the key lies in working with the existing framework
Absolutely.
and trying to scale that up.
Inclusive.
And that's really where the opportunity lies.
Yeah.
So again, whilst I'm kind of staying at the entrepreneurial subject, if I am a potential entrepreneur, really excited about solving for waste, what do the economics look like? Because you both run successful organizations, and how are the economics like?
Unfortunately, not
is it,
so good
is it
at the
making money,
moment.
not making money?
Unfortunately, not so good at the moment. We can share that with transparency that it's single-digit profit after taxes. The gross margins are just barely double figures. And the reason around this, I would like to quote, is the fragmentation in the supply chain. I mentioned that at our organization, we've split it into 9 tiers of the supply chain. Now, if you don't look at the system as a whole and try and solve the problem across the system, you're not going to be able to have gross margins and profitability and economics across the supply chain. Let me quote this. So everyone downstream in the supply chain, I'm talking about the large FMCG companies, we know the kind of gross
In
margins.
fact, if you
there.
could just help define upstream and downstream in
Sure.
this context.
Yeah, it's very important. Thanks for that. In the reverse supply chain, upstream is where you actually the waste is generated, and downstream is where the waste is solved, which is the recycling and
Okay.
So when you look at it at the recycling end and beyond, your gross margins are quite high. I would quote numbers like 30% gross margins, etc. But when you look at downstream, it can be single digits like 5% to 10%, approximately, less than 10%. So unless and until you have vertical integration and you look at it as an entire supply chain, you're not able to, I'm not saying share it, but the economics across the supply chain doesn't exist. So which means that if you set up a fantastic recycling facility, you still don't have the supplies of raw materials. So you need to start from scratch. And this is the dirty bit of waste management. It's the collection, transportation, pre-processing until it goes to the recycling. So the economics is not there yet, but it's getting there. Unless and until we look at it as a systems approach, it's not going to happen. And when I say systems approach, everyone is involved. The government has funds. The budgets have started to increase. The government is starting to put together better budgets for infrastructure. The consumer has to start paying for the services. We mentioned earlier, it's a services industry. The polluter has to pay for it. Right? We're not asking them to cross-subsidize anything else. You just have to do your bit. So if everyone does their bit, including the recyclers, the brands, etc., the procurement policies, etc., the economics can work and it can be very lucrative.
Well, I agree with Arun. It is challenging in this space, but to put it simply, there is money to make, and especially as a registered organization, you need to follow certain compliances, which makes it that much more difficult to make profits. But nevertheless, if you have your process in place, if you have your systems in place, you have your supply chain in place, you have your services in place, it is a profitable business.
I would imagine so, right? Because it's such a large opportunity. Just the sheer volumes of waste that's being generated, and someone needs to kind of solve for it. So is it a function of the scale at which we are today, and just with sheer scale alone, we will actually be able to look at better opportunities
Profitability will only come at scale.
at scale,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Got
And
it.
I like to throw into the mix what I mentioned earlier as well about resource recovery,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to create a business case around it. And waste is not waste. It's material.
Right.
It's resources. So when you look at it as a commodity, as a material, you suddenly see value for it, right? So if it fetches the best value, it helps add that revenue stream. And then you bring in the other revenue streams to compliance of the polluter pay principles or the EPR. There are other things like plastic credits. We spoke about another company who actually pays an additional value for the waste, like 10% to 15% of the waste incremental is paid just to make sure that there's no child labor in there. There are companies like that as well. So it adds to it. But I would definitely want to say that for people looking at this, why segregation at source is so important? Because it creates a business case. It helps with scale. That helps. And Marwa mentioned this earlier, not in my backyard syndrome. It helps to solve the waste wherever the waste is going outside of the house.
Got it. And the one is, of course, you look at it from an entrepreneurial opportunity, and the other is you also look at it from someone wanting to look at it from a socio-economic lens, where I personally look at it and see that, look, if there's more garbage being generated, there are going to be vulnerable parts
Communities.
of the population that are going to get more impacted than, say, people like us, right? Because not in my backyard. Um, what is the impact that you've seen happen so far on, say, children, marginalized youth, or people who live near landfills? How bad is that problem? And the reason why I want to kind of get into this is I want to bring in the awareness that why does segregation really matter? Because if you don't segregate, tell me what happens to communities.
Yeah. You know, you just go on YouTube and you just search Mandur, the earlier landfill that we used to have. And in fact, I brought up the year 2012 when it was a landmark year for waste picker integration, and also a landmark year because that was that was the year when the landfill crisis hit Bangalore.
I still
That's
remember that. That was
Yeah,
like,
that's
and
absolutely.
when
we had piles of garbage on every corner
Every
of
yeah
street.
of the
yeah
city.
uh, Mandur, the landfill that was supposed to last us 15 years, filled up in 5 years, and that was 2012 because the city didn't plan to handle the waste at the growth the city was going towards. If you, I'm sure we visited. I mean, Arun's also visited these landfills, and it's disastrous. From the groundwater, which is black in color, all the way up to 1,000 feet, to the air being difficult to breathe because of fire that creeps up because of the methane that gets generated from that mixed waste, to flies all around those communities. The impact was so bad that neighboring villages would not send their daughters to those villages surrounding landfills because of the health concerns.
Yeah.
They would not get married. So that's the kind of impact that landfills have today, from polluting the air, the soil, and if there's a water body close by, God forbid, that reaching the entire, world. Because all your channels of water pathways are connected. And today, I mean, it was brought up earlier, it's not just in our bloodstream, the plastic has reached our, even breastfeeding mothers are feeding plastic through their breast milk. So it's a disastrous situation we're in. It still can be channelized with better efforts to handle waste more responsibly. But it's for the people who are watching today that everybody takes that conscious decision. It not just being responsible for the waste they generate at their homes or offices, but hold the municipality or the panchayat they're in, whether rural or urban, hold them accountable for what is happening to the waste today. Climate change is real. It is happening today. We're seeing parts of the world where does not receive rainfall is receiving rainfall. We're seeing where there was never drought as drought hit. So there's no turning back. Everybody needs to take responsibility. And it's very simple solutions. Segregate at home.
Right.
Make sure the waste is reaching out of, it's going out of your homes or offices, is going to responsible destinations. All you need to do is ask what's happening. That's all you need to do. If you know there's something wrong, try and put in that effort to make it right. Because there are organizations like us across the country that are working to make a difference in that city or rural area. Just reach out to them. I could help you reach out. I'm sure we could
Awesome.
help
Yeah.
you reach out to people in your city or your village or panchayat. There are people working out in this solution.
So I think the goal has to be that, A, of course, do your bit, which
Yeah.
is do your segregation, and then do follow up with just finding out where is that waste going,
Absolutely.
right,
Yeah.
in
And
your local neighborhood.
Yeah, and I must thank you for bringing these topics out, because this is less discussed topic, right?
Yeah.
First thing you asked, you mentioned about was why is segregation is so important. And I think from today's discussion, it's very clear. You bring in the economics, you bring in the business model, you bring in the impact, the stories, the human stories around it. You mix it, you can't fix it. End of story. You mix it, you lose it. You lose the resources. End of story. So there's just no other way. And it can't be told any differently to anyone else, any more simpler to anyone else. And like you rightly said, you have to track your waste. Even if you segregate your waste at source, I mentioned to you earlier that you still have a responsibility. You still can do something about it. And we know a lot of people who do that as well. They carry their waste once in a week, just walk to their neighborhood collection center, drop it off. It brings livelihood to them. It brings a lot of solutions around it. So track your waste. That's very important. But Marwan, thanks for bringing up the Mandoor story. The Mandoor story is very famous in Bangalore. That was my moment. That was this is it moment. I moved away from corporate, and basically it was the waste on the streets which took me to Mandoor. And the moment I saw Mandoor, I'll never forget that. You have the defunct industries which are supposed to process the waste on the right side, and you have landfills, like craziness of waste on the left side, and the
And then
stories.
you have the villages.
Yeah,
and
the
you have
villages.
right nearby.
Yeah, the kind of stories that I heard at that time. This
Yeah.
was like 15 years back, 12 years back. The women could not conceive children. There were skin diseases for people. Farmers could not water their plants because the water initially, when you turn on the bore wells, it's yellow and then it immediately turns black. These are stories which are remarkable. But I'll tell you what, in spite of being in this domain and working with the informal sector for so long, recently, just like 6 months back, I visited another facility in south of Bangalore. And this was to provide an experiential kind of a visit to some clients that we had. And I was again drawn back to that moment 12 years back, where I actually saw kids in the waste and playing amongst the waste inside the bags and everything. And then there's a large dump truck which is just digging a lot of waste from the ground, and there's mixed waste. And I cannot tell you how bad I felt again. So nothing has changed so much in the past 12 years in spite of us working on this. And that's because everyone needs to think about this differently. Otherwise, it's going to be the same. And I'll tell you, that particular incident that happened in that particular colony was all the waste coming from the very premium residential complexes nearby. We mentioned earlier, right? We'll be able to take you to these places. It's very easy. Just track your waste. And if you're living in a high society residential complex, it's just in your backyard. And that waste is seeping through the leacher is seeping through the ground. And we know the water shortage in Bangalore. That's coming back into your taps, into your kitchens. You like it or not. So
Yeah.
that's a reality. If you want to know the reality, it's just in your backyard.
And I think we just can't emphasize this enough. Segregate. Like
Absolutely.
if you're watching this, just segregate. And I love that tagline. You mix it, you can't fix it. I
That's
think
it.
that's what we should be advertising in every corner
Yeah.
of
I
our
know.
city
And just
and
to
the
give you an
country. Actually.
example, tissue papers.
Yeah.
I don't understand why you need tissue papers. We never used tissue papers like
But
5,
now
10
they're
years back.
everywhere.
Everyone
Every
uses it.
cafe, every restaurant.
Yeah.
People are using it at home.
Even before you ask it, a tissue paper is handed to you, right? Very simple test. You can actually recycle paper at home if you wanted to. Just put it in a blender, your tissue paper, you put it in a blender, and you sort of drain out all the contaminants, and you put it in a muslin cloth, press it, and just leave it for some time, and you get paper, right? It's very simple. Tetra Pak.
really?
Yeah, Tetra Pak can be done. You can do that with Tetra
It's that
Pak
simple.
packaging. It's that
So
simple.
I just take tissues and
Yeah.
use tissues and kind of blend them
Try that.
and drain it out.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't come out as a real paper because
Sure,
that's an industrial,
sure.
but you get some form of paper, right? Try that with tissue paper, fresh, and tissue paper with all the curry and the gravy wiped off from your plates or your hands. You'll know that because you've mixed it, you can't fix it.
Wow. Wow.
And just to understand these kind of issues of what happens to waste once it leaves your home, we've created this program called the Waste Trail, where it's an educational program for schools, for colleges, and for corporates, where we take you on a journey of what happens to waste once it leaves your premises. So we take them to our MRF facility that's run by a waste picker. So the kind of impact that they're creating by integrating organizations like us, that they have a direct social impact. We take them to our biogas facility, which is the only operating 30-ton biogas plant today with our partners Carbon Masters, that is in Haravali industrial area. So we know the bad side of things, but we know there's a good side. And unless you see it, you will not understand the impact that you're creating. And that's the kind of program, that's what the program does. It's a workshop. It's a field visit based workshop.
I think that's so important because I again go back to, and as a common citizen, I'm never seeing my waste
Yeah.
after I've left it. And that awareness is so crucial
Yeah.
to change my behavior.
Yeah.
But are you seeing a cultural shift happen in India towards waste and how we kind of deal with waste and how we throw our waste?
I think
Or are we still kind of
there's
Fine.
been a drastic change since the last 14 years to some level in cities. People understand waste is a problem. How they're dealing with it is a different issue, but people know waste is a problem. So while there are insensitive people, there are sensitive people in the same bus. So if someone's littering, then somebody say, please don't litter.
right?
So that's the kind of levels that we have reached to today. If we have pockets in different cities that are handling waste responsibly, composting, dry waste collection centers, segregating door to door at the house level, there are some places where that's not happening. There are restaurants that are being conscious. They have simple messages in their premises saying, eat as much as you want, but don't waste food. There are restaurants that are being responsible and not giving out food in plastics, but in a more sustainable packaging. There are some who encourage you bringing your own containers. So there is a lot of change that's happened over these years. Corporates are more sensitive because there is pressure on sustainable development goals following ESG, EPR and all that. People are taking more responsibility. But I would say it's not enough. It's not at a level that we need everybody's intervention. Government also realizes a problem, but they're looking for quick fix solutions, which is not ideally the best solution. You need to look at it more holistically. You need to understand India as a country, we are very dynamic. You mentioned earlier, if the West has that solution that we can replicate here, we need to understand what waste that gets generated in the West is not the same that what gets generated here in India. Our waste composition is highly organic. So 40 to 60% is organic, while in the West it's the reverse. Well, the organic component of the waste that gets generated is between 20 to 30%. So the incinerator facilities that they have developed to handle their waste problem could handle that waste there because their organic components are much lower. Here, those technologies will not work. especially for mixed waste, especially if there's an organic component
Mm.
involved.
Mm.
So solutions are there, sensitivities, people are getting sensitive, people are being, questioning what's happening to waste. They are reaching out to organizations like us. Okay, we want to be responsible. Events are going more responsible
Yes.
because rather than the sustainability side of things, they are having a problem handling waste. And if you know that there is an organization that's taking a responsibility of the waste, not just offering a service, but ensuring it's data driven, that you know how much waste that gets generated, it's going to the right destination. My waste, my organic waste today was converted to biogas and it's used in restaurants replacing LPG. People are proud of that. They're contributing to those positive changes. So there's a lot to be done. And I'm sure people viewing here must be wondering, should we get involved or no? Please do, because it's not, like I said, one organization or two or three or four. There are a lot of people that needs to get involved. Synergize, collaborate, and integrate.
Right. You mentioned this whole thing about organic waste being the largest
Yeah.
sort of waste, and 60% upwards is organic waste that we're generating. Have you guys come across any innovation or any advancement of technology that you see is promising that could address this whole organic waste sort of dealing? Because a lot of the inorganic waste, like you mentioned it, incinerators and all can
Yeah.
actually that are
Recycling first, only
Yeah.
non-recyclables incinerate.
Yeah.
right.
We need to be
Absolutely,
clear on
very
that.
clear on
Right.
that.
But for the organic side of things, ideally, like Arun mentioned earlier, compost at home.
Mm.
Compost within your premises, so you're handling waste. It's the best natural resource for fertilizing your soil. If you have large landscapes where you're growing plants and trees and fruits, your own urban gardens, whatever, best resource. You don't have to invest in any chemical fertilizer. And you will see for yourself that the produce that comes out of organic compost is much better than chemical fertilizers, even in farmlands and everything. So the liquid slurry, which is the second byproduct of the biogas facility, one is the biogas, the other is the liquid slurry, black gold. Once you put that in the soil, the farmers in the neighboring surrounding our facility, they wait in line for our slurry because that enriches the soil so much and has such high water retention. They don't need to water their lands that frequently that they used to earlier. The produce would come out much better. The frequency in which they would get their produce would increase. So these are the changes that we have seen. And from at an individual house level, like I was saying, compost at home
Right.
is simpler.
Whether I'm even if I'm living in an apartment,
Even in
I
an
could just
apartment.
compost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have different solutions that's available for home composting. But when you go higher in terms of quantities, the best viable way is biogas.
Mm.
And the bigger the capacity of the biogas, the more viable it becomes, and the sooner you turn profitable from the economic side of things.
Right.
But from a waste handling process, biogas is the only solution for large quantities of organic waste. You get to replace LPG, either develop community kitchens depending on where your biogas facility is set up, pipe it down to establishments that are within the vicinity, or bottle it and send it out to restaurants or even big kitchens, community kitchens, or even industrial kitchens. You can replace LPG there. All the trucks that are currently running, that is supplying the biogas to all the restaurants that we are working with, is running on our biogas. So it's clean energy,
Mm.
So your emissions are much lower, and you're supporting the ecosystem. And the second byproduct, like I said earlier, the slurry, liquid slurry, beautiful for composting,
Right.
and you get the highest NPH values in those soils and in the compost. So that's how I would say for organic waste.
Yeah.
Do you want to
And
add to that,
I'd like
Arun?
to second that opinion as well. The fundamental that I like to approach here is when something works so well, we don't need any more innovation in other forms of technology. I'd just like to add to what Marwan mentioned, and within the composting and biogas technologies, there are advancements anyways. For example, You look at large-scale composting. There's something called as in-vessel composters. Unfortunately, it took a little bit of a different direction in the 24-hour composter concept, where you just burn the waste and it becomes something like black-colored soil. But it's not the right solution. So all the viewers out there, and if you're living in a society, you most probably have the 24-hour composter at home. Please don't use that, because that does not work. It just burns the waste, and you can't use the waste. It does not form compost after that. But then you have some innovations with larger in-vessel composters, which can simplify the manual work around it. But the basics of that technology is very, very simple. And I'd like to link it up with the earlier conversation that we were having around what cultural sort of mindsets do we have. We've been doing this for ages. It's not something new. So let's not try and come up with some fancy solutions with high investments, etc., which does not really work in India. This works fantastically well. Coming into the biogas scenario, there are lots of companies who are working on artificial intelligence within the biogas technologies. Like Marwan mentioned about the success around his JV, there are other companies who are looking at similar innovations as well. For example, like a hub and spoke model. You don't need a larger composter because you don't have space in a facility. You have a small digester. You take out that slurry once in a while, go deliver it to your centralized biogas solution, which does a perfect job. So those kind of interventions of technologies within something that's proven is the way to go. And I'm a very firm believer of that. Coming up with something new which doesn't work, it just sort of puts us back many years, and it doesn't scale up it doesn't solve the problem as well.
Right.
And we can
so
move
composting
into
works, biogas works, proven technologies. Just coming to figure out models that can scale this.
Keep it simple, and it works
Much simpler rather than starting from scratch.
Yeah, there's always better innovations that can come within those realms. Like we know of fantastic champions who have biogas, like a small plant which is like a big tandoori drum which is kept on his rooftop, and he brings the waste from his neighborhood. Some 2 or 3 houses drop off the wet waste. He just he's a retired person and he loves doing this, and it helps cook his tea every day. So what a way to live. So those kind of simple solutions, fundamentals can really work.
Yeah, we've been talking about the waste being generated after products have been created and consumed, and then they go down this whole your upstream, downstream sort of a thing, right? We've been noticing of late, at least, especially over the last 5 years, a lot of innovations coming up in products that are made from sustainable materials or materials that are biodegradable. In fact, at the Better India also, we've covered many such initiatives. Some of them go on to scale. A lot of them really kind of are at a prototype level, trying to explore. How viable are these, according to you, and how much of a dent can they make in waste management?
Not so much at the moment, in my opinion. And I'll tell you why. The reason is we're not looking at the core of the issue. The core of the issue is something different to what we're trying to solve. For instance, we're trying to find an alternative to a straw. What's the core of the issue there? It's not the alternative material, it's the usage. You actually make something out of plastic, which will last you 500 years, but you're designing it for use for 5 minutes or 2 minutes for drinking the tender coconut out. So for me, fundamental concepts needs to be worked on. Rather than actually looking at alternatives.
But like, for instance, in the straw, now you have bamboo straws and people are like, hey, I'm going to reuse this bamboo straw. Does that really make a dent on the number of plastic straws that are getting into the landfills?
Not really, isn't it? I mean, I just drink my tender coconut as it is. I don't use a straw and it's fun doing that, It's, but let's move on to the sort of, nitty-gritties over here. The concepts of hierarchies of waste management needs to come in very strongly.
Say that. Could you elaborate that more in terms
Sure.
of what are the hierarchies?
We're talking about incineration. Forget that's the real, like Marwan mentioned, that's the last resort. That's for hardly 5% of the waste that you want to manage using that model. The next is the
incineration is where you just burn the whole thing.
Just burn it. You don't care about just burn it. The other is recovering energy at it, right? It's maybe at scale it's working right now, but that's not the way forward. Recycling does not work. You can't recycle plastics. For 40 years, we've been told that plastics is recyclable. They just put a recycling logo on it, but it doesn't recycle. I can tell you that. It's very, very difficult to recycle. Very small percentage, less than 10% of global plastics gets recycled today. If it was recyclable, that wouldn't be the case, right? Then comes the other concepts. These are the best parts of waste management where you can reduce, reuse, refill, etc. We need to focus around those. So in my opinion, when I was a kid, I used to go buy milk from a milk booth.
Yeah.
I used to love it. I used to take my bicycle, take my stainless steel can, drop a coin. That used to be a fantastic thing. Those kind of initiatives are out there, but it's not scaling at the moment. And I'll tell you why. We used to, again, there used to be another concept where, I used to go buy a carbonated drink. I stopped using carbonated drinks knowing what's in it these days. But when I was a kid, I used to go buy the glass bottles, pay a deposit, give back the glass bottles, get back my deposit. That's called the deposit refund scheme, which is a very fancy term these days. But we used to live that life a long time back. What's stopping us from going back? There's these waves, these cyclic changes of culture, etc. And we're now adopting our heritage from earlier. Why can't we adopt that in waste management? And there is a reason around this as well. Did you know that actually there is a high potential of making more money selling the packaging rather than the water? So if you're actually selling a bottle of water, there is a high chance that you're making more money in the plastic bottle than by selling water. This is the reality out there, which not many people know. And did you know that there are lots of repercussions of this? Does water have an expiry date? No, it doesn't, right? But when you fill it in a plastic bottle, it does have an expiry date. Okay, and you can't use the water after the expiry date. So very strange. So where I'm coming from is innovation needs to come in from a refill and a reduce concept. There's always going to be waste. We are never going to go out of business. There's enough waste out there. But how do we actually look at concepts of repair, reuse, which we always used to do? The other day, so I had a problem with my car. The cable of the gear lever was broken. The guy asked me to change the entire gear lever assembly. Where's the concept of repair coming in? So these are all picking up in different parts of the world, picking up in India as well. But for me, these are the solutions that are really the need of the hour, rather than looking at high-end technologies where it's not really proven yet. These are, classical examples of how we've lived our lives so many years back. Why can't we bring that back?
Yeah, I'd like to second what Arun said, where our emphasis should be on the whole reduce, reuse, refill kind of concepts. But while that would be a beautiful world to live in, where from tomorrow there would be government policies encouraging only these kind of processes, but the reality of things is there are alternatives coming in. You have so-called organic plastics, where compostable plastics. In the name of organic or compostable, they're introducing materials back into the economy, into the market, where they claim that it's compostable, but it's not. There's evidence of it. Starch-based, plant-based, all of it. There's a very thin barrier of, acceptance of introducing a product into the market, and the approvals needed. Unfortunately, that's the truth of the day today. Alternatives to plastic, you have all leaf-based plates, cutlery coming in, all that. It's great to have alternatives to plastic, but at the end of the day, it's still disposable. And that's the problem.
Yep.
While you're having alternates, which is great to plastic, that solves one part of the problem, but you're still not solving the other problem, which is generating waste. So you're defeating the whole idea of reducing waste generation. So people out there who are watching this program, while there are alternatives, can be a solution to plastic, but the focus should be on reducing waste. And that's what I would like to say.
And but how do you kind of straddle that with the whole idea that in general what has been seen is that economic growth is linked with more consumption, and more consumption is linked with more waste, and it's not just more consumption, it's more consumption at a higher level of convenience, right? And at the same time, we want people to be conscious of their consumption. How do you guys even sort of think that these two have to be spoken
It's like
about
a
or
chicken and
dealt
egg
with?
situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a chicken and egg solution.
Because
So,
the incentives are not aligned,
huh.
right? Like I said, like you mentioned, right? The backyard syndrome. So if it's not in my backyard, it's not my incentive to get
Yeah.
it done. I'm happy to order the next iPhone, and if it's not working, I'm just discarding it and I'm ordering another one. People do that with phones. You
Yeah,
can't even get
absolutely.
them repaired now.
No, you can't.
They don't even have them being modular enough to kind of
Yeah,
change.
yeah.
And that's the talking about the glass bottles that
Yeah.
the soda bottles that you were talking about recently at one of the milk booths. You have the cold milk served in glass bottles. When we gave it back, they said we don't need it. You can throw it in the dustbin. And so the dustbin had a pile of all the bottles because the economics now apparently don't seem to warrant them to take them back.
Yeah.
And so on one end, that's the growth engine showing that, hey, look, we're kind of going upwards in terms of this thing. But then obviously the downside is that we're consuming more and creating more waste. How do we kind of reconcile with these two things?
See, it's not a one person angle that you can look at, or one organization, one community angle. Now, while the growth of the nation is on consumption, and the more you consume, there's more economic growth, there's more populace and everything. It has to be a synergetic approach. Now, you have the consumer whose focus is on consumption, right? While that's helping the economy, the government, the brands that are introducing these materials should work in tandem and try and figure out how to handle this waste. And that's where the concept of EPR came in. That the people introducing these materials into the market should take responsibility of bringing it back, so that it does not become a waste, it's a resource. So you waste less energy in natural resources and plug in post-consumer waste as your resource back into the market. And that's the attempt that needs to be made. While consumption can be looked at in a growing pattern, while there can be control there, but in a realistic world, it can be challenging. So these are the solutions where you look at understanding what is the waste that gets generated and handling it should be the focus for the country and the world as at whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we really need to look at it that this is the one planet
Absolutely.
we have.
Yeah, the only planet.
Consume if you really need to,
Correct.
but also be aware of what that consumption is
Yeah.
leading to.
See, there are so many decisions that we take as an individual during the day.
Yeah.
Okay. It's very important to ask ourselves a lot of questions when we take these decisions. And I'll just like to backtrack a little bit in terms of what we were speaking about, that I segregate my waste, someone else mixes it. I'm saying there's still a way out, right? Similarly, conscious consumerism is the most important aspect here. There are lots of aspects like this, conscious travel, a lot of these aspects. So let's stick to conscious consumerism. I'm saying, are you asking questions to yourself? Are you unnecessarily creating waste for the sake of convenience? That's the first question to ask. If you look around, there are alternatives as well to not unnecessarily creating waste. That's the bare minimal you can start with. If you want to go the next level, you can always find a solution to something that is a problem today. There are refill stores out there in Bangalore that you want to go and make sure that you don't have any kind of packaging footprint that you've created. But the next more important question to ask yourself is, what are you going to do about it? Every single consumer has the power to change. And I'll tell you how. There was a case in Scandinavian countries where the citizens started observing the packaging around a toothpaste tube. Now, toothpaste tube, we all know the story, right? So the toothpaste tube is so strong. I think you should try this out. You should just close it nice and tight and jump on it. It's not going to break. Why do you need a paper packaging on top of it? I'll tell you why. It's for advertisement. So the consumers, they said, I'm not going to buy a toothpaste tube which comes with paper packaging. And the industry had to change. The industry then went with the tubes, and they found a way to, just keep it standing by putting it on the cap, and it just stands up erect. And there you go. You're solving the problem of waste. So every consumer has a choice to make to start with. What kind of questions you ask yourself is very important. and then what you do about it is very important as well. And the fact that you can do something about it is the most important message I want to share today. And we all know that it's possible together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good one. So basically, we do have a lot of choice in terms
Yeah.
of dictating how much waste will end up kind of generating. So, like I just want to kind of break it down for, let's say I'm an 18-year-old student watching this, everything about waste, and you've given me this whole landscape and what's happening and all. What can I do? What can I do to help the cause?
Very simple. Just check at home whether you're segregating waste, right? First basic step for anyone, be it your home, office, your 18-year-old or a 80-year-old. You can ensure segregation of waste that you generate. You don't have to worry about anybody else. Be responsible for the waste that you generate. Make sure it's going to right destinations. So figure out every ward, neighborhood has a municipal officer, a sanitary officer that passes by ensuring things are in place. Find out which ward you belong to. Call up the control room of the municipality and find out who is the health inspector, sanitary officer within your ward, and ask him what is the system that's being followed. And if everything is in place, that's the minimal thing that you can do. Consume less. Simple things like that. If you have refill options available within your city, your neighborhood, use those refill. Encourage refill systems. Simple things like carry your own bottle. Carry your own bottle. You don't need to buy water bottles. And Arun already mentioned the kind of contamination in plastic bottles. Who ever heard of water bottles having an expiry date? So carry your own bottles of the water from your home. There are options of refill available for water at multiple locations. From restaurants to your office spaces to your schools, colleges, you have refill options. And at the end of the day, as you're growing up, I think you pass on this information to your friends, your families, and get them a little more responsible. You attend a wedding, you attend an event. Voice out to the organizers, voice out to the bride and groom, voice out to the event planner, saying you're generating a lot of waste. Can you do something about it the next time? Tell your friends and families who are hosting an event, who are planning to host an event, try and reduce waste. Can we look at our neighborhood plate bank or a city plate bank where we don't need to bring in banana leaves or leaf-based plates as disposables? Can we use reusables? Steel glass, steel plates. Can we get refill stations, water stations to refill water? It's just a little more effort of putting in a little more resource in terms of manpower to handle that. You have everything from a natural base to chemical based cleaners, whichever you're comfortable with.
Got it.
To, keep the hygiene maintained.
Right.
So these are all small action points that you can do.
Yeah.
Within yourselves, within your community, your friends, your family circle. And that spreads. That spreads like wildfire.
It does. I've seen that. Like if one person in the family starts living a certain lifestyle, a lot of the others start adopting because they're seeing the benefits of it. So I think these are great pointers. Very simple. Start with segregation. Go find out where your waste is going, and then just educate and create awareness, right, about this.
Because an 18-year-old is so well informed, get more informed about waste, and like Marwan said, make sure your parents and people around you do the right stuff as long as you're also doing the right stuff. So
and hopefully that 18-year-old becomes an entrepreneur in waste management eventually, because there's just so much to do here. And then so the other question that I have is like, if I'm a business owner, I have a small scale industry or a small facility, how could I be thinking about what should I do to better manage
same
waste?
principles. Segregate. If you're an industry with 10 employees or 1,000, ensure you have systems in place where segregation is followed. Create the infrastructure to handle that segregated waste, because every office space industry will have space for handling waste. Introduce the right infrastructure, as simple as segregated bins, color-coded bins, or labeled bins. We're all educated. All we need to do is follow a system. Bring in systems where people are instructed, directed to follow. Have agencies, organizations working in this space offer those services who will thereby deliver the promised solution of handling waste more responsibly. Get that data impact reports that can be sent out to you, and you can proudly say that to your investors, to your own staff, to the entire world that you are an organization that is following standards, that is supporting the environment. That's it.
Right.
Yeah, and being if you're considering small scale industries, there's so much to do in this space of waste management as an entrepreneur. So I know of some industries who were manufacturing single-use plastic. The moment single-use plastic was banned, they moved into paper cups. Now I'm saying that's even bad. Okay, so the choice is very important.
See a little more on this whole thing about plastic cup versus paper cup, and it seems like it's like there are sides on both sides. And some people
Yeah.
say, hey, this is actually environmentally friendly, but on the other side, it's not, because. Can you
Absolutely
give a little
not,
more,
yeah.
little more insight into, is paper cup better than a
You should
plastic
give
cup?
out the secret.
Yeah.
What's there in paper cups?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just greenwashing. It's still plastic at the end of the day. The paper cups still have plastic inside it. You can't imagine pouring a hot cup of tea into a paper cup and the paper not getting wet, soggy, and the plastic and the tea all over your place. These are the kind of silliness that we get into, and unfortunately, we feel silly at the end because we've not thought about it the right way. So paper cups.
So what we've just revealed is this secret, so-called secret.
See, it's
that,
very
that
simple
paper
to
cups had a
identify.
plastic
Yeah,
lining.
if you don't, a very easy way to identify, just soak your paper cup in water
Yeah.
for a bit. I think about 30 minutes should do. Then the papers, you can peel off the paper, and you'll see a very thin line of plastic. It's just common sense. You take out, roll a newspaper and pour any liquid. Will it hold? Won't.
I'll tell you more as well. Aluminum cans, they have plastics inside it. Can you even believe that?
Oh, wow.
A soda can has plastic inside it.
Right.
Yeah.
But coming back to the paper cup, what's very important to know is the life cycle, right? So if you were to use that paper cup effectively as compared to a plastic cup, you have to use it multiple times. And we know it's designed for single use. Use it, throw it, move on. But then what are the other hazards? You're actually having low quality plastic inside it, the liners, because paper cups are cheap, right? You can't have high quality plastic in it. Sometimes it's even wax, it's not even plastic. The moment you pour the hot beverage in it, it sort of gets, I'm sure it's, leaching into it, etc. That goes straight into your body. So never use paper cups. I mean, people say that it's convenient and eco-friendly. You even will see like a recycling logo on it.
Yeah, in green.
Yeah, I can tell you, paper cups are not recyclable. As much as 40% of it is lost, and because there's plastic sticking onto paper, the paper fibers are stuck to the plastic. You can't separate it out again. You can't recycle the plastic. You can't recycle the paper. It goes to a paper mill eventually. If you're lucky, if that paper cup is lucky, it ends up in a paper mill, and you extract less than 50% of fibers from it. It's something that we should
So
avoid.
is it actually that the plastic cup in its entirety made of plastic is more recyclable than a paper cup with
It actually has better value. Probably it's more recyclable. So if you want to use a plastic cup, use it multiple times. Don't use it single times. But I would say don't use it like Marwan said. Just bring your own mug, right? Bring your own cup, and you get a discount at a Starbucks or whatever. There's so many ways to think about this. But at the end of the day, it's like I said. Every person, every individual has so many choices in the day to make in a conscious way. It's their choice.
Yeah. And always make the choice of not using paper cups.
No,
Clearly, kind of. Well, which are the other kind of forms of packaging which are equally bad, which we don't realize?
Glass bottles are probably better, but what happens is your very premium alcohol, they've started, the brands have started packaging them in paper bottles. That's a trend that's picking up, unfortunately. And again, the life cycle assessment is a big problem. It has plastic under it. You cannot recycle that paper in your regular paper mill. And even if you can, it has very low yield. So I would say, the traditional stuff is always doable. Marwan mentioned about, carrying your own stuff. I remember my grandfather had a pocket with some bags, cloth bags in it. And yeah, when it moved into the plastics bag, he used to carry the plastic bag and reuse it as well. Today, people can carry 2 phones, but they'll not carry a single cloth bag in their pocket. Okay? So these are the simple aspects that we have to talk about and go back to our older nature of living in a very sustainable way.
Yeah.
Great. And because you guys have been in the space for so long, are there any sort of pockets or cities across India that have really impressed you with how they've managed their waste successfully? If so, like where would that be?
If you look at the Swachh Survekshan, there are a lot of cities that are being showcased as good cities that are handling waste responsibly. You have some in the northeast, you have some like Indore and stuff, other cities like that. But as a city, as a metropolitan city, it's a challenge. But in smaller pockets like Indore, and I forget the name of that town in the northeast, um, there are good practices that are being followed. It all comes down to citizen participation, comes down to governance, municipal engagement, and accountability. So those are the only ways that you can achieve, sustainable living.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you a few instances of a few cities. You take metro cities, it's like what Marwan mentioned, take, dispose by just dumping it. That's not even called landfill, it's just dumping it. You look at other cities like an Indore, the collection is quite high. So the collection coverage, what I mean to say is every house is probably, the waste is collected from their doorsteps. That's probably very high. But then the resource recovery is very low. So low that it's probably 10%. And while it looks like an interesting business model, it's not something for longevity. It's maybe like a band-aid treatment for the moment. But there are some places in other smaller cities where it has been a bit more better, I would say. I would like to quote the example of Udupi as a city in coastal Karnataka, which actually has very good levels of waste management. And this goes back to multiple efforts of multiple people. We also work there, but then this goes really long back to maybe 10 years back. So, the decentralized solution that we spoke about, they actually went into a very extreme level of decentralized, which did not work, but then they backtracked. So a lot of the villages and the city of Udupi actually has good collection and good level of segregation at source. The wet waste is managed within their farmlands, and in the city, the wet waste is managed by composting and other ways as well. But the dry waste, which is a major chunk of the waste, gets collected first of all. It reaches a collection center. There's a beautiful story of locals, women self-help groups managing the waste by sorting it, and that provides a good livelihood to them. The government recognizes them as well locally. But most importantly, the government, beyond that, downstream, they've started setting up supply chains. We've helped by providing technical consultancy to the government as well. So the mothership that I spoke about, the MRF that we have, has been replicated in different contexts in different places. But in Udupi, it's come out very nicely. And for the past 2 years, the MRF there has been very operational. There's a very good business model around it. There's a very inclusive entrepreneurial model around it. The government is invested in the land and the facility. The facility does not look like a waste management unit. It has beautiful, lush greenery outside it. And again, the locals have come in there. Entrepreneurship has blossomed. The only problem there at the moment is recycling infrastructure does not exist to some extent, and it has to be shipped very long distances, and that's why the business model is not there. But I would like to quote this one example. There are other examples as well, but in a very holistic way, for a long period of time, with a lot of intervention, a lot of people intervening here in waste management, and a very inclusive local system to be set up, it's definitely a role model city for me. There are other cities where, like Goa, etc., waste management is quite well thought through, where the landfill is very low. So there are positives in different cities, but then unfortunately segregation is low, and it goes to the cement factories as well. So you could say a lot of this, but for me, Udupi was a very interesting story.
Interesting. Yeah. I consistently see the word. I think if I play back this whole episode, I think segregation really stands out. I think that's the core of
and
waste
you can make
management.
it happen. Yeah, you can make it happen with so many benefits, so many impact stories around it.
Yeah. So beyond doubt, like if you were watching this, just segregate. Just make sure your waste is clearly demarcated into those 3 bins: dry waste, wet waste, sanitary waste. Great. I want to kind of sort of conclude this with we've understood that the waste crisis is going to be there. it's large, and it's so large that there's enough opportunity for entrepreneurs also to come in. What are the hopeful signs that you are seeing that we are in the right direction?
I think the idea that people are getting sensitive, that waste is a problem, is the biggest sign that people are taking action and holding the municipality and the government accountable. People are using the support of the law in places where they're not finding leverage with the government. So they're using the leverage of the law in forms of PIL, public interest litigations, to hold the government accountable. There is organizations like us that are currently offering services across the country and offering sustainable solutions. That's a good sign. There are a lot of governments in small silos, small pockets that are taking responsibility. There are a lot of government officials who are on a gung-ho effort of making sure that they are a little sensitive towards what happens to waste. So ensuring that their neighborhood or their ward is segregating waste. If they have a neighborhood biogas facility or a dry waste collection center or composting unit, they're encouraging the sustainability of these functions
Right.
within that ward. So, and especially the most important thing is the brands, the multinationals are all falling in line of understanding and taking responsibility of the waste that they're putting out into the economy. So we are heading in the right direction. There can be, again, I repeat that there can be so much more that can be done. But given the 15-year journey that I've had, I've seen a drastic change.
That's really good to know.
Yeah, I've seen a drastic change, but we could have been elsewhere today if those efforts were much more stronger back in the day. But keep your hopes alive. Keeping our hopes alive.
Absolutely. I mean, that's our name, The Better India.
Yeah.
We want to kind of make sure that we are focusing on the right paths and hopefully inspire people
Absolutely.
to kind of,
No,
go
I'm
on that
sure.
path.
I'm sure it will, because the Better India has been putting out a lot of good content, reaching out, to people, and I'm sure it's impacting lives where it is. And I'm really grateful to be here speaking in this
Thank you
show.
so much.
And I hope people get a little more sensitive that waste is a problem. We all know waste has reached the water bodies. It's reached our bodies. So there's no hiding.
True.
It's reached Mount Everest.
Yeah. We've seen those photographs, right,
Yeah.
of all that waste being strewn around Mount
So
Everest.
waste is everywhere. And you can't run away from it. You're not going to stop generating it. The least you could do is be responsible for it.
Yeah.
That's what I would want to, give away today.
Yeah.
Be responsible for the waste you generate.
And for me, I think as a citizen, we all have to be proud about the policies that we have. Definitely one of the better policies in the world, I would say. And the government is acting quickly on various aspects of the nitty-gritties of the policy and getting better and better. For example, reuse has become a mandate in India through the plastic waste management rule, which is a fantastic thing. Now, whether it happens, we don't know. And that's the next thing. While we have the rules, implementation is lacking. It's improving, and that's a positive for me. While we have fantastic laws, it's getting better in terms of implementation. A lot of information is coming out, data is coming out, a lot of questions are being asked, a lot of people are getting more informed, and that's a positive for me. The second positive for me is a lot of the solutions are now, people are understanding that what has worked needs to be fast-tracked, and there are some finances coming in. It's very small, but we need financing for the industry. We need to, first of all, consider it industry and bring financing into it. There are some amount of financing coming in, but then people understand that without this, nothing is going to happen. For example, government money, government funds, budgets, and so private sector funding. If there are any gaps, the private sector can look at it as a business model as well. So that's coming in. So the financial part is coming in. But also, what I would say most importantly, we spoke about this earlier, is people. We need more people in this space. We need entrepreneurs, youngsters, startups, proven industries to look at this as an industry, as a potential industry. It's starting to happen. Technology is moving into this space as well, and without technology, you can't really enable waste management. We see it as an enabler. We don't see it as the silver bullet or the solution. But technology is coming in, and a lot of people moving into this space. So I think this kind of an audience through Better India is probably the best audience to make the change as well, as a consumer, as an entrepreneur, as a youngster, as a responsible citizen. And these are the three main positives for me. And we're going in the right direction. And like Marwan said, over the past 15 years, we've seen so much traction that the last 5 years has probably been way better than the first 10 years. So, yeah, a lot of positives there for sure.
That's really good to know. So, on that note, really, thank you to both of you for taking the time and sharing these incredible insights with us. Thank you for what you do. There are very few people who would want to take on this big challenge of managing waste, and you guys have been doing it so successfully. And thank you for keeping our cities clean and helping out the marginalized workers. I mean, it's incredible the kind of work that you guys are doing. So, guys, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing all of this here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
And I really want to end this with that line: "You mix it, you can't fix it."
Yeah. Absolutely. Hopefully that sticks with everyone and they do their bit as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.